Hey, Joe.
Hey,
How's it going?
it's going well. It's going
Good.
well.
Yeah, bring your mic over there.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you because I know you just got back from New York, and
Hmm.
I've always wanted to be there for, well, really the Macy's Day Parade, but I
Yeah.
think you were there for the tree lighting. So how was
Yep.
that?
Uh, busy. A lot of people. A lot of
Okay.
people. Yep.
Was
Very
the
crowded.
tree pretty cool though, or
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. They did an amazing job. It was huge, very bright. Great.
did you do anything else there that was kind of out of the norm or
Out
unusual,
of the norm?
or just unusual?
Um, no, nothing too out of the norm. Did a lot of just typical stuff, Broadway plays and lots of food and sightseeing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you see what? So what plays did you see?
We saw Six, we saw the Rockettes show, and we saw Hades Town.
I will admit I've not heard of those, the first and the last one.
Yeah, Six is like all the rage
Okay.
on Broadway right now. It's like one of the top 5 shows on Broadway.
Oh,
Obviously, the Rockettes have been doing their thing
right,
forever.
right. Yeah.
And then Hades Town is a fairly popular one as well. It's been around
Okay.
for a while, a few
Hmm.
years.
I'm not in on the Broadway stuff apparently, but that's good though. I like going to those. Those are fun. So,
Yeah. We also went to the Color Factory. That was a really cool thing. So I
oh,
highly recommend that. Not something you would necessarily think of because a lot of people don't necessarily know it exists, but great
right.
activity. It's kind of this interactive thing with colors and stuff. Great for
Okay.
kids. Super cool experience.
When I was there, they had that human like body exhibit where it
Oh
was
yeah.
like, like the no skin and it's all like
Right.
muscle tissues and kind of off-putting, but really amazing at the same time. So,
Yeah. One other thing I went to the Museum of Modern Art and went and saw The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh.
oh, really?
So that was
Okay.
very cool. I highly recommend that.
And was it like what you expected almost? Because
Yep.
you see these things in books and whatever. I just remember I was in Paris and um we were in the Louvre and
Hmm.
we made our way downstairs and there was like this huge mass of people and we were like, okay, what is it? What is everybody gathering around? And then you get there and the Mona Lisa is like this 8 by 11, sheet of paper practically. Like it was so small and it just surprised me. You see it in
Mm.
all of these textbooks and things and you expect it to be big and
Right.
it wasn't, but
Yeah.
cool.
Starry
Okay,
Night
well,
was exactly what I expected. It was awesome.
oh yeah, that'd be amazing. So I need to find my way back to New York. I've only been there just once and it was like literally like 48 hours. So, but I'm excited to have you here on the show because you have a really diverse background. Like you've
Hmm.
been a developer, you've gone through all of those steps, and then from there though, you've also had a really successful career as a Pluralsight author,
Hmm.
and then you have had Thinkster.io, so you've been a bit of a business owner,
Hmm.
and then on top of all of that, you've run ng-conf and other conferences as well. You've had
Yep.
Framework Summit, um, Reliable Web, so just a lot. Like you've done a lot, and I think you have experiences that kind of bring in perspectives and understanding that I'm really excited to dig into and see what kind of knowledge and wisdom you can kind of share on some of these questions I have. But specifically, I really want to talk to you about the conference stuff
Hmm.
and meetups and just gathering for events because and I think a lot of people can relate to this. It's like when you go and you're at these events or you're at a workshop or something, people like to joke about how it's that fire hose effect, like
Hmm.
it's just so overwhelming. How can you possibly take it all in? So that's really what we want to dive into today and just kind of figuring out how can we make the most of those opportunities and really maximize our learning
Right.
so that we step back and can say that we actually benefited from it. So that is what you're here for. But
Okay.
we both love Star Wars, as I'm sure is
Right.
obvious. You have your Star Wars
Yep.
behind you, I have mine.
Yep.
But what I want to do is play a bit of a game with you, and we'll keep
Okay.
it short and simple. But have you ever, I'm sure you have, like the game Password. It's like on like game show networks and stuff. And
I don't know.
normally they'll have two teams.
Uh-huh.
And on your team, you'll have one person giving the clue, and then the other
Hmm.
person has to guess. And you're
Okay.
just trying to figure out what the word is But all I can do, so if I'm giving you the clues, all I can do is give you one word,
Mhm.
and you have to try to guess this password from my one word clue.
Okay.
And then if you don't get it, we'll try another one. But we're going to see, this is password Star Wars edition.
Star Wars edition of password.
Yes.
Can I have like an example so I can get a little feel for this?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So what I did was on my way fancy papers, I've got all of
Very
these.
fancy.
Oh, yes. Very. I have all these Star Wars words written down, and I'm just going to choose one randomly. So if we're doing like a practice one,
Okay.
Okay, let's see. All right. So, oh dear. All right. I'm going to see if you get this.
Okay.
Oh, there's a couple of ways I could go with that. I'm going to say parsec.
Parsec. Okay.
Parsec.
So like I might guess Millennium Falcon.
And that would be the answer.
And that would be the answer. Okay.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right.
But if I gave a crappy clue, or if it's just a
Right.
really hard word.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
if you said ship, I might think X-Wing or TIE Fighter.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Han and Leia, because you ship them, right?
That's true. I almost wanted to say, what was the name of the droid whose like processor was put into the Millennium Falcon? I can't remember now.
Oh yeah, L337.
There you go. There you go. Okay.
Or another ship could be Boba Fett and the Rancor Master. They seem to have some sort of a thing going.
They do. That's true. Yeah.
All right. I'm ready. Let's do a real one.
Okay. All right. Choosing the real one now. Okay. Oh, this is a good one.
Okay.
Oh, I think I have a perfect word for this. Annoying.
Oh, Jar Jar.
There you go.
Okay. That was easy. That was easy.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Let's,
all right.
let's do another one. Maybe let's try something a little, hopefully get something more challenging.
Oh, let's see. Okay. Well, I have one. I already know. I'm just going to find it. Yeah. Okay. And this one, I'm not sure how to do. I'm going to say shoulder. Shoulder. I know that's tricky.
Wow, that is tricky. Shoulder.
Uh-huh.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think of, is there any women in Star Wars that showed their shoulders a lot? I can't think of that. Maybe a gun that's held to the shoulder.
Interesting.
A lot of those. Shoulder. Well, I don't have a clue. I don't have a guess.
Let's see if and I don't know if this is really the right. I'll say Jabba.
Jabba. Okay.
Shoulder and Jabba.
Shoulder and Jabba. Oh, the little guy that Jabba had around. His name's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I'm not great with names.
It's
so
okay.
I totally know who he is. It's not Sayab Snub. It's a funny name.
Yeah.
Like Sayab's what's that?
Yeah. Salacious Crumb.
Salacious Crumb. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
Salacious Crumb.
He's awesome. I think you can buy him at Galaxy's Edge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a toughie. Yep.
Okay. Well, you passed though. You totally passed.
All right.
Well done. All right. So now that we've proven your Star Wars knowledge, let's get into the topic. Again, it's maximizing potential for learning Angular while you're at conferences, meetups, and that's online and in person. I want to kind of cover all of that. But I think to start, let's kind of get into how you even got into putting on conferences yourself. Like here you are, you're a developer. From what I understand, you were working with Aaron Frost. You guys were at Domo at the time, I think.
Yep.
And like, what was the process behind that? What made you think, oh, let's go start a conference?
Well, it wasn't my idea. to start a conference. It was Aaron and a guy named Kip. They kind of had the idea. So there was a bunch of people. We had a pretty big team. We were all on the front end team. There was 5 of us that actually started ng-conf. We were all on the front end team. One of the guys has been running a Utah JavaScript conference called Utah JS.
Okay.
And that's Kip. And he had the idea when him and Aaron were talking, and they kind of together came up with this idea. What about having a conference about Angular? This is back when Angular was starting to get popular, but there was no conference for it. So they're the ones who came up with the idea. I had been helping Kip out a lot at Utah JS conference, sort of like assistant organizing. And then, so he invited me to help, and we invited a couple of other guys because we felt like we needed a lot of people to help to throw on a real conference. And so that's kind of how we got started. So, but I had, the real key, I think, there is that I had been contributing to the community before that. Right. So this wasn't just something that just happened out of the blue and suddenly I'm running, one of the most successful conferences in tech. It was that I've been helping before that. I had been running or helping out with this other conference. I was doing a podcast, was really involved in the community. I can't remember if I had started the Utah Angular meetup by that point or not.
Okay. And that is a question I want to ask you. Okay.
So, but I've been doing a lot of things in the community and proving that I was, helpful and useful. And so that was why I was invited to kind of to participate in ng-conf.
Okay. So let me ask this then, because if you'd already been helping with this, like the JavaScript one, and you're not quite sure if the timeline, like if you had started the meetup yet, but what is it about conferences? Like, did you feel like there was a need for something else to help you learn? Like, was that the reason you wanted to start it? Was it learning value and you felt like, man, there's just not a lot about Angular. We really want something where people can come and like learn about it together. Was that any part of the process, or was it more just like for fun and stuff like that?
Well, I think that when you talk about doing community efforts, at least for me, I've seen that mostly the idea is creating a community. Right. And enhancing a community. And so learning is only really one aspect of a developer community. Right. Networking is definitely another aspect of it. Job hunting and finding is another aspect of a community. There's also this idea of community creating, I'm trying to think of a word, like a close-knit feeling, not just with other people, but between you and the technology. If you get more involved in that technology, then you feel better. You have better feelings towards that technology. You find it more interesting. The more you involve yourself with something, the better it is. Like, so I think people could see that in their life with anything that they do. If they only do it 5 minutes a week, it's not a very big part of their life. But like just Star Wars, if you like Star Wars and you just watch the movies, that's one thing. But if you start reading books, then you find more enjoyment out of the other things that you do, more fulfillment. And so there's all those aspects of community that make people want to build a community better. And then there's, the things for your career as well. It's nice. It's always a good idea for your career to be involved in the community because there's a lot of intangible benefits that come from that. But I don't think it's just about learning. I think it's about everything about creating a community. I've been involved in React communities and Elm communities and Vue community efforts and things like that, just because creating communities and being involved in communities is really cool. And enjoyable, I think.
There's a lot to be said for that, though. I think you just hit on something that really is important, because when you have that community, then I think learning doesn't feel like learning. And that's when a lot of it can really, you may not even realize that you're learning, but I think it's those moments when things really start to like settle in. And I've said it in like every single episode I've recorded that every person I've interviewed has pointed out this social aspect to learning and how important that is. And I think when you go to these events, right? Like I don't know, there's something to be said for that. So we've obviously like just hit on a really big thing there with the learning value, but is there anything else that you can say for learning specifically when you go to meetups, when you go to conferences? What is it that you think these opportunities really offer that you can't get with like an online course or a tutorial or even an in-person classroom setting? But what is it about conferences and community gatherings that really, I don't know, it has like a special kind of learning about it?
Yeah, no, for sure. It creates an excitement. It creates a zeal about the topic, that immersion, that fire hose. Like you might look at that and think, "Oh, there's so much that goes through. It's not effective learning, right?" You take home with you a few percent at best of all of the information that you're exposed to
Right.
at a conference, but the community, the interactivity, all that creates something that cannot be synthesized or simulated another way. So, like, to use an analogy, if you want to get in shape, there's a lot of things that you could do in order to become like what you would call in shape, whatever that you define that as. But of all the things you could do, buy a bunch of gym equipment, buy a membership to a gym, read a bunch of books, all of those things you could do, none of those is anywhere near as effective as becoming friends with somebody who goes to the gym.
Right.
Right. That if you want to be in shape, become friends with people who already spend time at the gym. That's the number one thing. That it's almost impossible not to become in shape if you become friends with those people. And everything else will follow from that.
Yeah.
Right. So same thing with technology. If you want to be great at something or really want to get more into something, become involved with the people that are involved in that thing. Like there's, as an old saying, the best way to learn something is to teach it. But it's not just because of the mechanics of teaching, although that's definitely true, right?
Yeah.
But it's also the fact that you are forced to, like, if you're going to teach something, there's some place where you're going to be teaching it. So you have to prep and you have to do all this work, and it drives you to do that. As you get into community, into conferences, you meet other people that are involved in things like that, and you become friends. Like I love most conferences are like this, but not all. But certainly ng-conf is, where if you know somebody that's big in the Angular community and you want to become their friend, like I'm not talking bosom buddy, super close friend, but friend enough that you could tweet at them and they would know you and remember you, and because you sat down and had a conversation with them for half an hour.
Yeah.
That's available at ng-conf, whether they're a member of the Angular team or a community member. So that zeal creates so much more opportunity for all of the learning to happen.
Yeah.
Now, outside of that, I could give tons of like little tips, like leave your work at home, right? When I say work, like don't ever check your email unless you're not at the conference. Spend every possible minute at the conference that you can until they close the doors and kick you out. Stay,
Yeah.
involve yourself, drink from the fire hose, open your mouth as wide as you possibly can, and spend as much time in front of the fire hose that you possibly can. Don't expect that you're going to remember everything, but be involved. Don't distract yourself. Socialize, go to every possible event, be as involved as you possibly can be. Those are all good things to maximize your learning.
Yeah.
But just the fact of being there, as long as you don't isolate yourself, is going to have super positive effects that are just impossible to synthesize otherwise. And I'm speaking specifically about in person. Online has some elements of that.
Right.
They're not great. There you have to be way more disciplined. Turn everything else off, turn your email off, turn all your distractions off, just be involved online, and whatever little bit that they do, be involved in that. It's 10 times harder to get it online. There are other benefits to online that you may not get in person, but it's definitely a smaller benefit than being in person.
But I think the value that comes with that, and you were touching on this too with in person, is that, going back to that like community feeling of when you go and you interact with people who maybe you've never met before, but you're exposing yourself to their experiences and their ways of thinking. And I saw this all the time, like in my classroom when I was a teacher with, students who if you put them in groups and they'd be doing some kind of like hands-on learning activity, the real learning seemed to take place for me in those kinds of moments. It wasn't the worksheets. It wasn't, sitting down and like rote memorization. It was when they could work and interact with the other kids because they were sharing experiences with each other. Like, oh, well, my mom showed me to do it this way. And my dad, he showed me to get out the Legos and to count with the Legos and learn multiplication that way. And all of a sudden it was like light bulbs would turn on because they could see what worked for the other kids. And when someone was sharing, oh, well, this is how I learned it. And then all of a sudden others were getting it too. And it's the same way with programming. Like, when you put yourself in those situations and you're able to hear, oh, that's how Joe does testing, or, oh, like Aaron, he does testing this way. Like putting yourself in those kinds of situations, I think just opens you up to those learning opportunities. And that really can be online or in person. That doesn't matter. Yeah. But you're right. Like, you do have to take that initiative. So that's kind of a question I have for you then is, there's a lot of people that just don't feel comfortable with that. Like that can be really pushing you out of that comfort zone. And when you're not in a safe place, be that physically or internally, learning does not happen, right? Like, you have to be comfortable. You have to feel safe. So for those people that that's just not their personality, they're more introverted, what can you suggest for them as far as like pushing themselves or trying to engage as much as possible?
Well, I think that's a good question, and something that is actually not as difficult as you might think on the surface. And that is that most of these places, they create and have organized structure to them. And so I'm an introverted person. Some of my biggest fears are, I can remember going to it was actually some kind of a conference. It wasn't a programming conference. It was something else. And there's in the room, and they basically just a gazillion people in this room, 200 people in this room. And the guy just said, okay, we're going to do a thing. So I want everybody to organize yourself into groups of 5. And I instantly had like practically a panic attack. And I thought, how could I possibly get to the door and slip out now? Because the last thing I would ever want to do is have some sort of this unstructured find 4 other people and be involved with them.
Right.
But so I really identify with introvert and being uncomfortable in social situations. But there are some things that you can definitely do that will, like, once somebody approaches you and starts talking to you, most people have an easy time, like, adjusting to that and being okay with that, or participating in whatever the activity is, right? So if it's we're going to code up something little, like being involved in that, and then just having the person next to you turn and say, I just don't understand this thing, and you happen to, and telling them how that works. Most people, those sorts of social situations tend to be easier for introverts. So
yeah,
I would say the thing is to, be a little bit about conquering your fear about just making yourself present and open. So like if it's a meetup, as an example, show up before the meetup starts early, 15, 20, 30 minutes early. And don't expect that you're going to be like, I don't know, a social politician going up and introducing yourself. Instead, you could just show up, sit down and be there, but don't pull up your phone, right? Don't have your earphones in, just be available and let somebody else approach you. And it will it may not happen the first time you go or the second time you go, but it will happen that you'll meet somebody else. When they ask for volunteers for a 5-minute talk, right? Not everybody has this same, but I don't have too much fear of speaking, especially if I'm talking about something that I happen to know a little bit about. Right. So volunteering to do something like that, whatever it is, figure out the things you are comfortable with, get involved in them, and the things that you're less comfortable with, they will come. Other people, if you're not comfortable approaching other people will approach you if you're just there for a long time, right? And that's true of conferences and of meetups and on all these sorts of things. You don't have to do something that actually makes yourself truly uncomfortable. Right. There's a little bit of uncomfortability just showing up and just sitting there without your phone in front of your hand, but that cuts you off. But if you just do that, you will meet other people,
Yeah.
You're gonna be stuck in the elevator with somebody. You're gonna be late, and you're gonna say hi, and they're gonna say hi, and then you're gonna exchange names, and then now you have a buddy, right?
Yeah.
That's the first buddy, and then it'll be the next buddy and the next buddy, and pretty soon you're gonna know a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think that's really the key, is that you don't actually have to step out of yourself. You just have to be there and show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so true of so many things in life, right? Showing up is oftentimes 90% of what it is.
I seriously had a college professor say that he said it was like 80% of your success in this class will just be showing up.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me through all these years. But, even like just being open to having someone else come and like hang out with you at lunch, and then asking, hey, do you want to go to the next talk together? Because what happens then is that as you go to the next talk, the next presentation, then once it's done, you can talk about it with each other. And that's, I think, where a lot of the learning value comes in, because then you can process it and, kind of break things down and ask questions or answer questions either way. Yeah. And that goes back to, when I was a teacher, we used to call it think, pair, share. And you would literally have a topic, you would think about it together, kind of talk about it. And then like just share. And that could be with just the two of you, or you could go share it with other people as well. But it's that process of what we've already said, like just talking about it with someone else, getting their input, figuring things out, and then being able to go back and share it with other people, I think is one of the key things. Because like you said, when you can teach it to someone else, I think that's when the real learning happens. If you can simplify something enough to explain it to someone else, it's really cementing in your mind how it works. So there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there are really so many places where you're going to end up like eating lunch at a conference. You're going to be at a table with other people. And as long as you don't close yourself off, or somebody's having a conversation about something, if you find that interesting and you have an opinion, then it's pretty natural to interject it. Another one, we teach this at pretty much every conference that I do, is you'll find the hallway conversations, and we teach, like the open circle, right? The circle should have a break. So you just go in there and stand and listen. And even if you just stand and listen and you're just present, you don't contribute, that's still something. And that, since it's 5 other people just standing there, usually doesn't feel nearly as awkward. And then maybe in the middle of that, there'll be something interesting that you might have to contribute or say. But there's always so many things to make that work, and to give yourself out there and have those opportunities to ask other people for help or offer to help other people, and do it in an organized manner where you don't have to be socially awkward, feel too socially awkward,
Right. Yeah. I hear you. No. Okay. Something else you mentioned that I don't want to let slip out of my mind before we go too much further was you mentioned, and one, I guess we did slightly talk about it, is that fire hose effect. And you were saying, there's just so much information. It's overwhelming, and you're probably not going to retain 95% of it. But I want to break that down, because how can we at least remember maybe 10% or 6% instead of just 5? What are some things that we can do to really help absorb everything so that it isn't quite as overwhelming as it potentially can be?
Well, one of the things that I like to do is to do analog notes. And some of that is to try to retain details. But honestly, when I go to conferences and stuff, unless I go into like an actual like hands-on workshop, I don't have too many expectations to myself of learning details. But what I want my notes for is to write down the names of the things that I've learned about or been exposed to that I wasn't exposed to before, so that I can go and check out and dive into further. If somebody shows me a great talk on using Netlify with Angular, and I've never done Netlify before, I might write down just Netlify. That's the only thing I write down from the whole talk. I don't write down the steps that they go through, or I might write down some other thoughts, like when they say, hey, when you're doing it, be sure that you do these particular things. I might write down notes about that so that I can go back to them. But small quantities, but of analog notes, not digital. Digital, then your email starts popping up and then you're gone. Right. And it is so easy to be in a talk and following the talk and be distracted for just 30 seconds, and then that's it. And hopefully not very few talks are organized that's really the cost of them. But so stay away from the distractions, but a little bit of analog. So bring a pad of paper, a notepad or something, or bring a different device like a Kindle device, like the new Scribe. There's a reason to drop $400 on that new Kindle Scribe.
Yeah.
So you can take notes. But a little bit of analog notes, I think, is a great way to. And then don't expect that you're going to watch a talk on doing some particular, testing methodology that after watching it, you learn it, because we don't learn that way. But what you want to do is take home as many new exposed ideas as you possibly can. That should be your expectation from a conference, even from a meetup, right? If you're paying for a hands-on workshop, you should actually walk away with real concrete skills. But then as long as you're there and involved in doing the hands-on stuff.
Yeah, I think that's important, and for a couple of reasons, because taking notes, there is something that happens with your brain when you physically write something down.
Yeah.
It cements it more into your memory than if you're just listening alone or watching alone. But writing it down kind of has that magic to it. But that's actually something I learned a little bit the hard way, because I was the I have to write everything down person.
Right.
Like I wanted so badly to remember everything that was being said that I felt like I had to write down as much as what the person was saying as I possibly could. And that it doesn't work, because you get so behind, you stop listening. So I love what you're suggesting of just write down 1 or 2 words of notes on go learn more about this later, but keep listening and be present in the moment. That I think is really good advice.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Now, what about if you have some learning goals that, you I don't know, dependency injection. Maybe that's something you're really struggling with, and you want to go to the conference and learn more about it, but there's no talks or presentations on that topic. How can somebody, or should they just put that aside? Should they just say, you know what, for these 2 or 3 days, I'm just going to absorb what everybody else is sharing? Or are there opportunities outside of the presentations alone to be able to do some more personal learning?
Well, I think there's tons of opportunities. The biggest one would be those that you meeting people and being honest about, man, I was really hoping to learn more. Like a great example here in the Angular world would be, a lot of people struggle with RxJS, for example, right? I really want to learn more about RxJS. And then you never know who will know something and be taught, and a conversation strikes up. And I'm not saying that you're going to end up, will you teach me RxJS? But more like, you probably have something specific you're struggling with, or something more specific that you're struggling with, or things you want to talk about, and conversations will happen, and you'll learn a lot from those conversations. People will tell you, oh, did you know about this great site for learning? And then there's a note to take down. It's just some website, some utility and tool for learning that. Or so-and-so gave a talk at the last one that was so awesome.
Right.
That sort of the benefits of networking. Now, the more people that you meet and talk to about the thing that interests you, it's like having spies everywhere that are gathering the best possible information and bringing it to you. And giving it to you, like when they say, oh, I'm struggling with that too, that's great. When they say, oh, great. How did you end up learning it? There's networking, I think, is one of the best ways to learn something that you are trying to learn, and just learning from those other people, and being honest about it. Sometimes you have something specific, somebody's happy to, our conference, we oftentimes organize little impromptu tutoring sessions, an experts room where people can go and ask specific questions. But if you're just trying to get a lot better at a thing, a workshop's great. But if they don't have it, then just talking to everybody about it will give you tons of resources and help push you through. Maybe you'll find out about a workshop that is going to happen that you didn't know was going to happen, right?
Yeah. And I think you're right. Like the resources are super valuable. I think that's one of the things that maybe we don't always identify as being an advantage or a benefit to being at a conference is that you are exposing yourself to a lot of different resources that you probably wouldn't have known about otherwise.
Yeah. Yep.
You also mentioned spies, and that made me think of that Spy versus Spy. Did you ever play that game?
I remember watching the comics, but I don't remember ever playing if I ever played the game.
Oh, the game was awesome.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Go check it out if you can. Spy versus Spy. But
Okay.
totally random thought there, everybody. But you mentioned workshops. So let's kind of get into that as well, because not always, but very often at conferences, there are more hands-on, usually 1 day, sometimes 2 day workshops.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of the same thing. It's a lot of just, really condensed, high intensity learning. Slightly different than a conference though, because the conference is more, shorter presentations. You can kind of bounce around a little bit. With the workshop, you're more restricted to just sitting in at least a room, if not
Right.
the same seat the entire time. And that can present a lot of learning challenges right there, especially for a lot of people who maybe have like attention deficit or something like that. So let's talk about the workshops. What have you seen at ng-conf as far as benefits to participating in them? Let's start with that.
I think again here, one of the benefits of the networking, both the networking with the other classmates, but also networking with the teacher. Most teachers are really, really on board with communicating with you after the workshop. So you find out how best to contact them and talk to them and ask them questions. And so that can create a big resource right there for people that are involved in workshops or go to workshops. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Workshops can always be hit or miss. The first time I did do a specific workshop, it's probably not as great a quality as the 10th time that I do it. But so your mileage can vary a little bit, and also your own preparation will determine how much mileage you get, and then your own mental state. Right. And if you have any neurodivergence or learning disabilities, those can also affect how much you get from the workshop itself. But good workshops allow you to miss a piece and catch back up, right?
Yeah.
And still go through. So I wouldn't feel like if I go to a workshop and I end up with 20 minutes where I can't pay attention, that I'm going to miss out on everything. That's good. Most workshops I don't think are like that.
Right.
I think that they're still okay, and the teachers don't mind reviewing, or if you stay during lunch and want to talk and review something that you kind of missed because you were sidetracked for whatever reason. Those things I think tend to work out really well.
I think something too that a lot of people don't, it's probably ingrained in us from childhood when we're in school and your teacher says you have to stay in your seat.
Yeah.
Right. But I actually, when I was teaching, would allow certain students to, like, if they had the real need for it, I would let them stand up and go into the back of the room and just kind of stand there for a few minutes. If they knew they weren't paying attention and they just needed to stand up for a minute and kind of like get their blood moving, by all means do that. Like, we're all adults when we go to these training sessions, to these workshops, and I don't know any workshop instructor that would be like, hey, sit back down,
Right.
So
No,
I think
for sure.
there's, take care of your body is kind of what I'm saying there. Like, you have physical needs, and going back to what I was saying earlier about when you're not safe, it also is physical. When you don't have your physical needs being met, safety and physical needs, if those two things aren't being met, you're not going to be learning.
Right.
And you have to make sure those two things are taken care of before you can really be in a good place to be absorbing the information that you're being fed. So
yeah, for sure. Getting drowsy is a big problem with those sorts of things. You'll end up missing so much because you get drowsy.
Right.
And honestly, standing up and walking away is oftentimes going to remove your biggest detractor, which is your laptop and the connectivity that came with it, right?
Yeah.
And that allows you to focus a lot better. So I totally am on board with that idea. Get up, go to the back of the room, pour yourself a cup of water. Even if you don't drink any, just pour it out. you
Yeah.
know,
Right.
but that getting up and getting moving and standing at the back of the room during the lecture portion, you know, it's a great way to keep yourself on board. And again, good workshops should be organized such that every 50-ish minutes you have a break,
Right.
right?
We call them brain breaks, right?
Right.
At Teamster, the brain breaks.
Yeah.
But it's
Exactly.
true, like there is that scientific research that shows that taking a break lets you absorb things while you're not actually thinking about them.
Mm-hmm.
That's important. But what do you do if you have 2 or 3 workshops that you're interested in and you can only take one? How do you know which one? Do you take the one that you suck the most at, or the one that maybe you've already started learning a little bit and that you can dive deeper into? Like, what's your recommendation with that?
Well, which one is your boss going to pay for is a good question, right?
Yeah, true.
It's funny because I teach on Pluralsight, and on Pluralsight, oftentimes employers are paying for their employees, and they want their employees to learn specific things. But when their employees, get the subscription, oftentimes they spend a lot more time learning the things they want to learn than the things that they're supposed to learn.
Right.
So I'm totally on board with using your boss's money to learn whatever it is that's going to land you that next job.
Right.
But I think interest is important.
Yeah.
If your boss really wants you to learn something, but there's enough leeway in there that you could pick the topic that you're actually more interested in, that I think matters a ton. Learning something that you're more interested in learning. Consider what's more valuable to your career, overall, not just your current job, but your overall career.
Right.
Keep that into consideration, but also keep in mind what your current job is. And when your boss is paying, treat their money with some respect.
Right.
Your level, I think, does actually matter a lot as well, right? Because if you want to learn something, but you've got very little idea of it, and the only workshop is kind of advanced, and you just don't meet the prerequisites for it, then you might be better served to learn something else, go to something else for that workshop, and then revisit that other one later on. Workshops are great. It's nice. There's a ton of structure, but if you could be self-disciplined, a workshop that's anywhere from $300 to $800, you can almost for sure find the same content for $10 to $100 somewhere online. But now you have to bring all the discipline, and there's no instructor generally to ask questions, and that's okay. But that just, that can let you go dig into something that you're maybe not ready for right now,
Right.
and go on later on and potentially use your own, money. There's many online subscriptions that are way less than $30 a month.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's important too. You're hitting on something there where it's like diversify your learning, right?
Yeah.
Don't just do online tutorials, go and actually try something more in person, have that instructor.
Oh, yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said for that. Just diversifying your approaches and not just sticking to one method only. But okay.
Yeah.
So we've got conferences, we've got workshops. Let's kind of end here then on meetups. Slightly different. It's not over, a couple of days. It's more just like with the Angular community meetup, we try to keep it to like 90 minutes, up to 2 hours sometimes. But let's go back to what you said right at the beginning when you were talking about you were setting up, you were participating in the JavaScript conference, and then you created and helped be part of starting ng-conf. But then you mentioned somewhere in there, I also started this Utah Angular meetup.
Mm-hmm.
Why? What was it about a meetup that you felt like was going to be beneficial or different enough than ng-conf or than the JavaScript conference? What is it about a meetup that you feel like offers different kinds of learning opportunities?
At least me personally, I felt like it was in some ways not so much that it was different. It was just lots more of the same and lots more of what I really love, which is getting together with other people, talking about a subject that I'm interested in, learning from them, and having opportunities to teach them. So a meetup really is like a mini conference in a sense,
Yeah.
And so for me, it was definitely just more of the same. It's very local, where a conference tends to be non-local. Sometimes conferences tend to be a little bit more regional or local, but most conferences are pretty usually more widespread, where Meetup, you end up with the same set of people. Meetup after meetup, generally you see
Yeah.
the same people more often. So for me, it was really more of the same, not really that it was specifically different. It was actually because it was the same that I liked having meetups. And I've been going and attending meetups since the early 90s, but back then we called them user groups. It was before, nobody
Nice.
called them meetups until meetup.com
Yeah.
kind of came out and said, hey, we're going to corner the market on how user groups meet. So before then, you'd only find out about user groups through weird, strange word of mouth things.
Right.
But for me, it was just like a mini conference and an opportunity to just get more of the same. And I love meetups. And there's really two types. There's online meetups, which are really popular now, especially since the pandemic. A
Right.
lot harder to do the networking, right? Sometimes they'll schedule these events. And so in that case, you should, to maximize your learning, again, put all your distractions away, devote that time and be there and be present, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you can. In the in-person ones, it's a little bit easier to not be distracted as long as you keep your devices away from you. And you can show up early, you get socializing and networking and oftentimes pizza.
Right.
So the in-person meetups are really, really, really great and a little bit easier to benefit from, so long as you keep your phone in your pocket. But the online ones, you just got to be a little bit more disciplined, but great talk, always great talks, great something. Do yourself a favor. Don't drift off in the middle and just say, well, I'll just watch the recording later on.
Right.
Right. Keep yourself focused,
Probably
keep
won't.
yourself present. Yeah,
Yeah.
you really almost for sure won't.
So a couple things there too that I want to just add my little note on there is like what we've seen with the Angular community meetup is that people who've shown up there, when you have the opportunity to go to the in-person event, like with ng-conf this last time, we had people from our meetup who we've been buddies with who show up every time. They come in, they participate in the chat, they get to know the speakers, they get to know the organizers, they get to know the other members. Then come ng-conf, we all got together and we hung out before, during, and after the conference. And a lot of our conversations were fun and silly, but a lot of them were also about Angular. And it was that networking that I think is what makes ng-conf so special, because when everybody comes together and really has that community feeling, but to be able to have like met these people outside of the conference at these meetups, you've already built that relationship. And then it just makes ng-conf that much more amazing, I think, or whatever conference that you go to. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And that social aspect that you were mentioning. One thing though, that we haven't said yet is with meetups, there's a lot more opportunity. Usually they're monthly, whereas a conference is just once a year, maybe twice if you're lucky. But with a monthly event like that, you have the opportunity to give a talk, and it could just be a 5 or 10 minute lightning talk, but use those opportunities. A lot of the times the meetups are looking for people to give these presentations, and yeah, it's scary. It can be, but that's one advantage to these online ones, is that you can't see your audience, right? And so it's a great way for you to practice that and get out of your comfort zone. But it goes right back to what you were talking about earlier, where like when you turn around and you teach other people and you're putting in all that time and preparation to be able to understand something well enough to teach it, that is so helpful for your own learning. And meetups are such a great place to do that, because it's not a conference where you're competing, to have your talk selected over other people, hundreds of applications. Meetups aren't going to be as competitive. And so it's more likely that you'll be selected, and just reach out directly to the director and the co-organizers. If you can just do that, they'll figure out a way to get you on their lineup. So definitely I would encourage that, though, is just that participating in terms of actually contributing and teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. I love that.
Cool. Okay. Well, do you have any final thoughts then? We've kind of covered the whole run around there, but do you have any final thoughts on ways that people can maximize their learning at these kinds of conferences, meetups, other events?
Yeah, I think to just kind of go back to that first one of the earlier points we had, which is showing up is oftentimes 90% of the work, right?
Right.
It's just a matter of actually showing up, and that's where everything comes from. So if nothing else, set yourself the expectation you're just going to show up, and so many things will follow from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. It's simple, but so true. So cool. Okay. Well, I have to have you do this. I think we would be totally wrong not to have you mention ng-conf 2023.
Yep.
So what can you share about that? What can people know about that? Where can they find more information?
Yeah. So the website is going to be up momentarily, and you can head over to ng-conf.org and check out the information about ng-conf coming up in 2023. It's happening in June on the 14th and 15th. Workshops for a couple of days beforehand, and it'll be probably a slightly more intimate affair than it has been in some of the years in the past. But we're really excited it'll be in Salt Lake in June, so it's nice weather, not too hot, not too cold. It'll be a great time, and really excited. So go grab your tickets, get your boss prepared to fork out that dough so that you can have a great time and learn a lot and move your career forward, right? And become, I always say, the best thing to do is to become the expert in the room, and that's this is how you do it.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Okay. So yeah, everybody go get your tickets. And then I also want to mention the Angular Community Meetup. We do this twice a month. We now have a Spanish event on the second Tuesday of every month. So whether you are a native speaking Spanish person or it as a second language, we have a great team that has brought in so much energy and passion. They've done a great job helping to organize those events. And then our English events are on the fourth Tuesday of every month. And these are all online. It's all free. And we have great prizes there too. I mean, that's just an added bonus on top of all of the great learning and networking. But we've had so much fun. I've really, truly made some of my best professional friends through the meetup. And I can't speak enough about the opportunities that are there. But get involved, ask how you can help and contribute, because boy, if you really want to get into the community and meet people, get involved in a meetup.
Yeah.
So it is volunteer work, but it pays off dividends for you in the long run. So definitely suggest it. But yeah, you can either go on meetup.com and just look up Angular Community Meetup, or we do have a website, angularcommunity.net. So go check it out there. But if anybody wants to connect with Joe, just get to network with him a little bit, ask him some questions about conferences or about his courses on Pluralsight. You can reach out to him on Twitter.
Yep.
He's at Joseph Eames. It's EAMES. And he would love to connect with you there. But thank you so much, Joe. I think really it's just good to know, because it is fun to go to these conferences, but at the end of the day, it really is about the learning. And I think having these tips and suggestions is really helpful. So I appreciate you coming on.